If no one stands between fear and innocence, then fear becomes the law. The morning air over Grey Pine Pack carried the crisp scent of pine needles and damp earth as wolves gathered in the center of the training yard, their murmurs spreading faster than the cool autumn breeze. 3 tiny wolf pups huddled together near the old stone platform, their ears lowered and their wide golden eyes fixed on the ground. They were barely old enough to understand the weight of the voices surrounding them, yet they sensed enough to know they were in trouble. Elders stood in a solemn circle while older pack members watched from a careful distance, whispering about broken rules and forgotten discipline. No one stepped forward. No one questioned what was about to happen. Near the edge of the square, Emily Carter tightened her grip on the small basket she had been carrying back from the herb gardens. Her plain gray dress blended into the crowd so completely that most wolves rarely noticed her presence. That was nothing new. As an Omega, she had learned years ago how invisible kindness could become in a world that admired strength above everything else. Yet the frightened cries of the pups reached a place inside her heart she could never ignore. She recognized each of them immediately. One had once followed her through the forest gathering wildflowers. Another loved sneaking into the kitchen hoping for warm biscuits. The smallest always curled beside her whenever thunderstorms rolled across the valley. They were mischievous, curious, and endlessly energetic but never cruel. An elder's deep voice echoed across the square, announcing that every young wolf must learn responsibility, or the entire pack would suffer the consequences. The crowd nodded in quiet agreement. Emily looked at the trembling pups, then slowly at the stern faces surrounding them. Something inside her refused to remain silent. Before doubt could stop her, she crossed the open yard. Every step felt louder than the last until she stood directly in front of the 3 frightened children, gently stretching both arms to shield them. A wave of stunned silence rolled across the gathering. Several wolves stared as though they could not believe an unnoticed Omega had interrupted an official judgment. Emily's voice trembled only for a heartbeat before growing calm and steady. "If someone must answer for what happened, let it be me. They're only children." Gasps spread through the crowd. The pups peeked around her, their fearful eyes filling with hope for the first time that morning. Far beyond the circle of watching wolves, a traveler wrapped in a dark cloak remained perfectly still beneath the towering pines. Hidden beneath the shadow of his hood, his sharp silver eyes never left the young woman standing alone before an entire pack, and for reasons he could not yet explain, something deep within the alpha inside him awakened. The silence lingered long after Emily's words faded into the cool morning air. The elders exchanged uncertain glances, not because an Omega had spoken, but because she had spoken without bitterness, without fear, and without asking for anything in return. The 3 wolf pups pressed closer behind her, their tiny hands clutching the back of her dress, as though it were the safest place in the world. Emily could feel their small fingers trembling, yet she never looked back. If she did, she knew her own courage might falter. The eldest council member lowered his staff and studied her with narrowed eyes. "Do you understand what you are doing?" he asked. Emily nodded gently. "I understand they are still learning," she answered. "Sometimes children need guidance more than judgment." Soft whispers drifted through the crowd. Some wolves frowned at her words while others quietly lowered their eyes. A few remembered moments from years before when Emily had quietly comforted frightened pups after storms or helped elderly pack members carry heavy baskets through icy paths without expecting gratitude. Those memories had always been easy to overlook because kindness rarely demanded attention. Hidden beneath the dark hood of a traveler's cloak, Alexander Thorne remained perfectly still. He had crossed countless territories during the past several months, disguising himself to understand how different packs truly treated their own people beyond polished reports and flattering ceremonies. Most leaders welcomed him with rehearsed speeches whenever they recognized the Alpha King's crest. That was why he had left the royal banners behind. Truth was easier to find when no one knew who was watching. His silver eyes never left the young Omega standing before the council. She did not possess the commanding presence of a warrior or the polished confidence of noble blood. Her dress was simple. Her hands carried faint traces of soil from the herb garden. A loose strand of chestnut hair rested across her cheek as the autumn wind drifted through the square. Yet there was something unexpectedly powerful about the quiet certainty in her voice. She had stepped forward without knowing who might approve or condemn her. She had simply chosen compassion. His wolf stirred deep inside him, not with aggression or pride, but with unfamiliar curiosity. It was a feeling he had not experienced in years. One of the smallest pups slowly peeked around Emily's shoulder and reached for her hand. She smiled softly before giving his tiny fingers a reassuring squeeze. The child immediately relaxed, taking a deep breath as though her calm had become his own. Alexander noticed every detail. Strength could command obedience, but only genuine kindness could dissolve fear so completely. Beside him, his loyal royal guard, Nathan Hale, remained disguised as an ordinary merchant. He leaned closer and spoke quietly enough that no one else could hear. "Should we step in?" Alexander answered without moving his gaze. "Not yet." Nathan studied the young woman for another moment before asking, "You believe she can handle this?" Alexander's expression remained unreadable. "I believe everyone here is about to reveal exactly who they are." As the morning breeze carried golden leaves across the old stone courtyard, Emily lifted her chin and met the council's eyes with gentle determination. She still had no idea that among the silent faces watching her stood the one wolf whose decision could change the course of her entire life. And the Alpha King found himself hoping she would never change the compassionate heart that had already begun to transform his own. The council remained silent for several long moments before the eldest elder finally spoke again. His weathered face softened just enough for the crowd to notice. "Very well," he said. "The pups will spend the next week helping repair what they damaged instead of playing through the afternoons. As for you, Emily Carter, your willingness to accept responsibility has been seen." It was neither praise nor condemnation, yet it was enough to dissolve the unbearable tension hanging over the square. The three little wolf pups looked at one another with tearful relief before throwing their arms around Emily's waist. She laughed quietly, brushing leaves from their hair one by one as though nothing remarkable had happened. "Now," she whispered, "I believe all three of you owe the elders an apology." Without hesitation, the children nodded and hurried forward with lowered heads, offering sincere words that surprised nearly everyone watching. The oldest elder accepted their apology with a gentle nod. Around the gathering, conversation slowly returned, but something had changed. Wolves who had ignored Emily for years found themselves watching her in a different light. She had not challenged authority for attention. She had simply reminded everyone that mercy could teach lessons fear never could. As the crowd dispersed, Emily gathered her forgotten basket and motioned for the pups to follow. They eagerly skipped beside her toward the herb gardens at the edge of the village, where rows of lavender, mint, and mountain sage shimmered beneath the morning sun. The smallest pup reached up and slipped his tiny hand into hers. "Were you scared?" he asked in a timid voice. Emily smiled without looking down. "Of course I was." The child blinked in surprise. "But you still stood there." She nodded. "Being brave does not mean you stop feeling afraid. It means you choose kindness anyway." The words drifted through the quiet path, carried by the soft rustling of leaves overhead. A short distance away, Alexander and Nathan followed without drawing attention to themselves. Nathan watched the simple exchange with thoughtful eyes. "She could have walked away," he murmured. "No one would have blamed her." Alexander answered almost immediately, "That is exactly why what she did matters." They paused near an old oak tree as Emily knelt beside a narrow stream to rinse fresh herbs. The pups surrounded her, laughing as one accidentally splashed water onto another's boots. Instead of scolding them, Emily patiently showed them how to clean the roots without wasting water. Each child listened carefully, eager to imitate her gentle movements. Alexander noticed how naturally they trusted her. Respect had not been demanded. It had been earned through countless small moments no royal report would ever record. An elderly she-wolf carrying a heavy basket approached the winding trail, struggling over uneven stones. Before anyone else reacted, Emily stood, hurried over, and lifted the basket with an easy smile. "Allow me," she said warmly. "Your knees should not have to carry all of this." The older woman hesitated before gratefully accepting the help. Alexander watched as Emily walked beside her at an unhurried pace, listening with genuine interest to stories that most younger wolves would have politely ignored. There was no audience now, no counsel, no expectation of recognition. She behaved exactly the same when no one seemed to be watching. Nathan folded his arms and quietly exhaled. You were right to wait. Alexander kept his gaze fixed on the disappearing figure in the gray dress. No, he replied softly. I was right to observe. Deep within him, his wolf had become unusually calm, as though it had finally found something it had been searching for without ever understanding what it was. And for the first time in many years, the Alpha King realized that the greatest strength he had witnessed all morning had never come from power at all. That afternoon the golden light of the sun settled gently across the valley, wrapping Grey Pine Pack in a peaceful glow that felt completely different from the tension of the morning. Emily carried a small wooden bucket toward the nursery cottage where the youngest wolf pups spent their afternoons while their parents worked throughout the territory. The 3 little wolves from the council gathering raced ahead of her, laughing as though the fear they had carried only hours before had already begun to fade. Their cheerful voices echoed through the trees, and Emily could not help smiling. Watching children recover so quickly had always reminded her that hope was stronger than worry when someone simply offered a little patience. Inside the nursery, she carefully arranged fresh herbs along the windowsill. Lavender filled the room with a comforting fragrance while mint leaves rested beside warm tea, prepared for an elderly caretaker whose voice had grown tired after singing lullabies all morning. Emily quietly swept the wooden floor, repaired a loose blanket, and mended the torn sleeve of one tiny coat without anyone asking her to do so. She moved through every task with the same gentle rhythm, never rushing, never seeking recognition. To her, caring for others was as natural as breathing. Outside the cottage, Alexander and Nathan had found another quiet place beneath a towering maple tree overlooking the nursery yard. Neither man spoke for several minutes. They simply watched. The 3 pups gathered around Emily as she sat on an old bench, each one eagerly telling a different story at exactly the same time. Instead of interrupting, she listened to every excited voice with complete attention, somehow understanding each child despite their endless chatter. When one became frustrated after losing a simple carving game, Emily handed him a smooth river stone. Every stone becomes polished because it keeps moving, she said softly. Do not be discouraged if you do not succeed the first time. The little wolf studied the stone before smiling again and returning to play with renewed confidence. Alexander noticed something unusual happening around her. The children laughed more freely. The nervous caretaker rested without guilt because Emily had quietly taken over several chores. Even a pair of frightened birds settled onto the nearby fence instead of flying away. The entire corner of the village seemed calmer simply because she was there. Nathan finally broke the silence. You have met queens who commanded great halls, scholars who advised entire kingdoms, and warriors who inspired thousands. Why does one quiet Omega hold your attention so completely? Alexander considered the question carefully before answering. Because none of them forgot they were being watched. Nathan looked toward Emily again as she patiently tied one little pup's untidy shoelaces before brushing dust from another child's shoulder. There was no performance in her kindness. No careful attempt to appear generous. Every gesture seemed effortless, as though compassion had become part of her nature long before anyone thought to notice. As evening shadows slowly stretched across the valley, one of the pups looked up at Emily with bright, hopeful eyes. Will you still be here tomorrow? He asked. Emily smiled with quiet warmth. As long as someone needs me, I will always do my best to be here. Those simple words settled deeply inside Alexander's heart. In that moment, he realized he was no longer observing the village to judge its leaders or measure its strength. Without intending to, he had begun returning each day for only one reason, and the realization left even the Alpha King quietly wondering where that unexpected path might lead next. The following morning a thin layer of silver mist floated above Grey Pine Creek as the village slowly awakened. Emily balanced 2 baskets filled with fresh bread and healing herbs while making her familiar walk through the narrow paths between cottages. Everywhere she went, someone greeted her with a thankful smile or a quiet wave. She never hurried past anyone who needed a kind word, even when her own list of chores seemed endless. The 3 little wolf pups soon spotted her from across the meadow and came running with bright faces full of excitement. They proudly showed her the repaired wooden fence they had helped rebuild after the council's decision. Emily clapped her hands with genuine delight. You kept your promise, she said warmly. That is how trust grows, one good choice at a time. The children stood a little taller beneath her praise. Hidden behind the busy marketplace, however, not everyone shared that feeling. A small group of influential pack families watched the growing affection surrounding the quiet Omega with increasing concern. They believed respect belonged to rank, not compassion. One merchant folded his arms and frowned. Ever since the council gathering, the pups listened to her more eagerly than they listened to their own instructors. Another answered in a lower voice. People have started repeating her words. That is how influence begins. Their uneasiness spread quietly through the morning, carried from conversation to conversation until it finally reached Council Elder Marcus, a proud leader who valued strict order above all else. He listened without interruption before speaking in a measured tone. An Omega should comfort, not inspire. The balance of the pack must remain clear. By midday, a formal message arrived requesting Emily's presence before the council once again. She read the parchment carefully, then folded it without complaint. One of the elderly healers looked at her with worried eyes. "You have done nothing wrong." Emily smiled gently. "Then there is no reason to be afraid." She continued sorting herbs before calmly making her way toward the council hall. Not far away, Alexander received the same news through Nathan, who had quietly gathered information throughout the village. "They believe she is changing the younger generation," Nathan explained. Alexander remained thoughtful. "Is she?" Nathan considered the question before answering. "Yes, but not through commands. Through example." A faint smile touched Alexander's face. "Then perhaps that is exactly what they fear." Rather than revealing himself immediately, he decided to observe one final time. If Emily remained the same under quiet pressure as she had during ordinary moments, then every impression he had formed would be confirmed beyond doubt. The council chamber filled long before Emily arrived. Elders occupied carved wooden seats while respected families gathered along the walls, curious to witness what would happen next. When Emily entered, she bowed politely to every person present before standing quietly in the center of the room. She carried no anger and offered no defense before any accusation had even been spoken. Her calm surprised nearly everyone. Outside the open windows, the three little wolf pups waited, together beneath an old cedar tree. They were not allowed inside, but each child held the same hopeful expression, believing with all their hearts that the kind woman who had once stood for them would somehow find someone willing to stand beside her before the day was over. The council chamber grew so quiet that even the crackling fire seemed unusually loud. Elder Marcus slowly rose from his carved chair and rested both hands upon the polished oak table before him. His expression revealed neither anger nor warmth, only careful restraint. "Emily Carter," he began, "during the past 2 days your actions have become the subject of many conversations throughout Grey Pine Pack. Children repeat your words. Families praise your kindness. Some believe your influence is beginning to overshadow those appointed to guide this pack." Emily listened without interrupting. When he finished, she lowered her eyes respectfully before answering in a calm voice. "I have never wished to replace anyone. I only try to help wherever I am needed." Several elders exchanged thoughtful glances. Her answer contained no pride, no hidden challenge, and no attempt to defend herself beyond the simple truth. Yet a wealthy merchant stepped forward before the silence could settle. "Intentions are not the issue," he insisted. "When people follow one voice more closely than another, confusion follows. A pack survives because everyone understands their place." Emily turned toward him with the same gentle expression she had shown every frightened child and weary elder she had ever helped. "Respect cannot be demanded forever," she replied softly. "Sometimes it grows because someone chooses to listen before they speak." Her words were quiet, yet they carried through every corner of the chamber. Outside beneath the cedar tree, the three wolf pups waited anxiously, watching every face through the open doorway. The smallest tugged nervously at his older brother's sleeve. "Do you think Miss Emily is all right?" Before the older child could answer, Nathan quietly approached Alexander near the rear entrance. "If this continues much longer," he whispered, "they may mistake humility for weakness." Alexander remained perfectly still beneath his traveler's cloak. "That mistake has revealed far more than I expected." Nathan studied the council one last time. "Then there is nothing left to learn." Alexander slowly nodded. "No. There is only something left to reveal. He stepped forward with measured confidence, his boots echoing softly across the wooden floor. The unfamiliar traveler immediately drew curious looks from every elder. Marcus frowned. This hearing concerns members of Grapepine Pack alone. Stranger, state your business. Alexander reached for the clasp, holding his weathered cloak around his shoulders. For one suspended heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then the dark fabric slipped away, revealing finely crafted royal attire beneath, embroidered with the unmistakable silver crest of the Northern Crown. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. Nathan removed his own disguise beside him, exposing the insignia of the royal guard. Chairs scraped against the floor as elders, merchants, and warriors alike hurried to bow. Faces that had carried confidence only moments before now reflected astonishment. Emily stood frozen in place, unable to understand how the quiet traveler she had passed several times throughout the village had suddenly become the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. Alexander's calm silver eyes met hers for only a brief moment before he addressed the council. His voice remained steady, neither raised nor harsh, yet every word carried unquestioned authority. "Please rise," he said. "I have spent several days among your people without revealing my name because I wish to witness the true heart of this pack." No one dared interrupt. "What I discovered was not hidden inside grand speeches or impressive titles. I found it in the courage of one woman who believed that protecting the smallest among you was never beneath her dignity." Emily's heartbeat quickened as every eye in the chamber slowly turned toward her once again. But this time the silence surrounding her felt completely different from the one she had faced before. For several heartbeats no one dared to speak. Every elder remained standing with lowered heads, while the merchants who had questioned Emily only moments earlier avoided meeting the Alpha King's eyes. The silence carried far more weight than any raised voice ever could. Alexander slowly walked toward the center of the chamber until he stood beside Emily instead of above her. That single choice did not go unnoticed. The room watched carefully as the ruler of the Northern Territories deliberately placed himself beside the quiet Omega rather than behind the council table. Elder Marcus finally found his voice. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "our intention was never to disrespect this young woman. We believed we were protecting the traditions that have guided our pack for generations." Alexander acknowledged the words with a slight nod. "Traditions deserve respect when they strengthen a community," he answered calmly. "But every tradition should also leave room for wisdom." His silver eyes moved across the chamber, meeting each face in turn. "During the past several days I watched this village before anyone recognized me. I saw children seek Emily before they sought praise. I watched elderly wolves find comfort simply because she listened. I saw frightened hearts become peaceful in her presence. None of that happened because she demanded attention. It happened because she offered kindness without expecting anything in return." The elders listened in thoughtful silence. Nathan remained near the entrance, quietly observing the expressions throughout the room. The uncertainty that had filled the chamber was beginning to soften into reflection. Alexander continued. "Leadership is not measured only by authority. Sometimes the strongest example comes from the one who quietly serves everyone else." Emily lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable hearing so much attention directed toward her. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "I only did what I believed was right. There are many others who care for this pack every day." Alexander turned toward her with genuine respect. "And that is exactly why your actions matter. Even now you choose to share credit instead of keeping it for yourself." A gentle smile spread across the face of one elderly healer seated near the window. "She has always been this way," the woman said. "Many of us simply forgot to notice." Her quiet confession encouraged others to speak. A carpenter remembered Emily repairing children's toys after long workdays. A shepherd recalled finding her outside during a winter storm helping lost pups return home. The nursery caretaker smiled through grateful eyes as she described countless mornings when Emily arrived before sunrise to prepare meals without ever asking for recognition. One memory followed another until the chamber slowly filled with stories that had never been shared, because everyone had assumed someone else had seen them too. Outside, the three wolf pups pressed closer to the doorway, listening with growing excitement. The smallest could no longer contain himself. He stepped inside, clutching a small carved wooden wolf in both hands. His nervous voice echoed gently through the room. She always tells us that being kind makes everyone stronger. The little figure looked toward Alexander with complete sincerity. She never lets anyone feel alone. Alexander accepted the child's words with quiet gratitude before looking back at the gathered council. Today I have heard enough to reach my own conclusion, he said. The future of every pack depends upon courage, wisdom, and compassion working together. If one of those qualities is ignored, every wolf becomes weaker. As those words settled across the chamber, many bowed their heads once again, not because they had been ordered to, but because they finally understood the lesson standing quietly before them in the form of one humble Omega whose greatest strength had always been her heart. The council chamber remained quiet long after the final words faded into the afternoon light. No one seemed eager to break the moment, because something invisible had shifted inside every heart present. Alexander slowly turned toward Emily, his expression carrying none of the distance people expected from a king. Instead, there was quiet admiration, the kind that could only be earned through countless unseen choices. Emily lowered her eyes respectfully, still struggling to understand why the ruler of every northern pack had devoted so much attention to someone as ordinary as herself. Your Majesty, she said gently, if my actions have helped even one child become kinder, then I have already received more than enough reward. Her humble answer caused another wave of thoughtful silence to pass through the room. Alexander smiled faintly. You continue to prove my point without realizing it. He stepped toward the large windows overlooking the village square where children laughed beneath the warm afternoon sun. Many believe a kingdom is protected by its walls, its soldiers, or its laws, he said. Those things matter. But every lasting kingdom begins with the character of its people. Children who learn kindness become adults worthy of trust. Families who choose compassion strengthen every generation that follows. You have been building that future quietly, one heart at a time. Emily followed his gaze toward the square. The three little wolf pups were chasing one another through drifting autumn leaves, laughing without fear, their earlier worries already replaced by simple joy. She smiled softly. They only needed someone to believe they could do better. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. And you never stopped believing. Elder Marcus slowly approached and bowed his head toward Emily, a gesture that surprised everyone watching. I owe you an apology, he said sincerely. I mistook gentle influence for unwanted ambition. Today you reminded all of us that wisdom can arrive without seeking recognition. Emily immediately shook her head. There is nothing to forgive. We all wanted what was best for the pack. Her answer drew respectful smiles from several elders. She accepted neither blame nor praise more than necessary. Once again she chose peace over pride. Alexander quietly admired that choice. Nathan stepped beside the Alpha King and spoke softly enough that only he could hear. You have found exactly what you hoped to discover during this journey. Alexander answered with complete certainty. No. I found something greater. He walked back toward Emily until only a few feet separated them. Every eye in the chamber followed him. Emily Carter, he said warmly. The royal palace has many gifted advisors, skilled healers, and accomplished teachers. Yet after everything I have witnessed, I believe there is still something we lack. Emily looked up with quiet curiosity. Alexander continued. We need someone who reminds us why leadership exists in the first place. I would be honored if you accepted my invitation to visit the palace as my personal guest. Not because of your title, but because of your heart. A quiet gasp spread across the room. No one had expected such an invitation. Emily stood speechless, searching his face for any sign that he was speaking only out of courtesy. Instead, she found complete sincerity. Outside the open windows, a gentle breeze carried golden leaves across the courtyard as the three wolf pups looked toward the chamber with bright, hopeful smiles, unaware that the simple kindness they had inspired was opening the door to a future neither Emily nor the Alpha King had ever imagined only a few days before. Emily remained silent for several moments, allowing the Alpha King's invitation to settle into her heart, before she finally answered. Your Majesty, I have never dreamed of palaces or royal halls. I only hope to make each day a little brighter for those around me. Alexander's smile carried a warmth that few had ever witnessed. That is precisely why you belong wherever the future of this kingdom is being shaped. The council members watched quietly as Emily accepted the invitation with a graceful bow, not because it promised comfort or honor, but because she believed she could continue serving others wherever she was needed. As the meeting came to an end, the heavy doors of the chamber opened wide. The three little wolf pups rushed inside with joyful laughter, stopping only when they remembered they stood before the Alpha King. They quickly bowed with nervous respect. Alexander's expression softened immediately. "Come here," he said kindly. The children exchanged uncertain glances before walking forward. The smallest pup looked up with wide, hopeful eyes. "Is Miss Emily leaving?" Alexander glanced toward Emily before kneeling so he could meet the child at eye level. "She may visit the royal palace for a time," he answered gently. "But kindness never truly leaves the people it has touched." The little wolf carefully held out the small carved wooden figure he had carried throughout the day. "Then please take this," he whispered, "so you will remember us." Emily accepted the gift with shining eyes, holding it carefully as though it were the greatest treasure she had ever received. "I could never forget any of you," she promised. Outside, the entire village had gathered along the stone path leading toward the main gate. Word of the Alpha King's true identity had spread quickly, but even more surprising were the stories now being shared about the quiet Omega many had overlooked for years. Neighbors greeted Emily with genuine smiles. Elders thanked her for her patience. Parents gently encouraged their children to grow into the kind of person she had always been. As the royal carriage prepared to depart, Alexander paused beside Emily one final time before they stepped aboard. "I came here searching for the strength of a pack," he said softly. "Instead, I found the heart that gives strength its purpose." Emily looked across Grey Pine Pack, where children played beneath the golden evening sky and familiar faces waved with renewed affection. Then she smiled with quiet confidence. "A strong kingdom is built one kind choice at a time." Alexander nodded in complete agreement. As the carriage disappeared beyond the towering pines, the three little wolf pups stood together at the village gate, waving until it faded from sight. None of them fully understood that their simple need for protection had changed two lives forever. Sometimes destiny does not arrive through grand victories or remarkable power. Sometimes it begins with one ordinary person choosing compassion when no one else is willing to step forward. And that single act of kindness becomes the light that guides an entire kingdom toward a better tomorrow.